before I get to the sermon, I have to say that two things. One was that in when I'm in Tennessee, the loud and instrument that some people loved and some people considered obnoxious was the bagpipe with all of the Scottish folks there. But in Texas, with all of us Germans and Czechs, the accordion is the instrument of the angels. And when I lived in LA in the late 80s, there was a band, a group there called the Bobs, and they had a song called I Got a Bulky Rhythm in My Soul, and it was about polkas. And I was like, yeah, that's my song. Thank you, all of you. There are 7 I am statements in the Gospel of John. They begin in the 6th chapter and they end in the 15th. It takes up a big part of the book. I'm the bread of life. I'm the light of the world. I'm the door. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the vine. The author of John, ever the poetic spiritual type, gave us words that describe the character of Jesus. Character isn't something we talk about a lot, but I think is very important. You know, this book was written 90 to 100 years after Jesus' death. And John wrote to describe the quality of the character of Jesus and why people would want to follow in his way to people who would have never met him. Today's I am statement is the vine. I am the vine. Be with me, be rooted with me, and we will together produce the fruits of life. I believe this congregation is rooted in the vine, and I want to tell you why. First of all, I've been reading a book called The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory by Tim Alberta. And this week, I became engrossed with a book by NPR journalist Sarah McCannon, The Ex-Evangelicals. I'm listening to it on audio, and it's hard for me to do anything else. You know, I really don't have any real experience with evangelicalism. It's just not my background. I mean, I went to friends' churches growing up, and people have told me about being raised in evangelical homes and going to Christian schools where they were taught things such as dinosaur bones being placed by Satan to tempt Christians. But I also know that many of these people are deeply devoted Christians and live their faith with kindness and mercy. And lots of times these people know the Bible really well. They just interpret it really differently than I do. But just like all Christian denominations and sects, not all evangelicals are alike. But it does seem, in my limited knowledge, that fear plays an outsized role in this multifaceted entity known as American evangelicalism. Fear of being impure, fear of being sent to hell forever, fear of not telling enough people about Jesus, fear of missing God's call because you were busy doing something else, fear. And when I started doing research for this sermon, I was surprised at the number of essays that I ran across that focused on the pruning and the burning of withering branches, instead of focusing on love, bearing fruit, and loving one another. So holy joy is found in the person who is a light, a door, a shepherd, a truth, a way. And all of that can be found within us and enlighten and enliven us. Instead, they worried about being chopped off and tossed into a burn pile. And many of them talked about this fire burning forever and ever and ever and ever. Now, John wrote at a time that People would have understood vineyard imagery. In fact, a study published in the 2003 issue of the journal Science suggests that the harsh climate during the Pleistocene era paved way for the domestication of the grapevine around 11,000 years ago in Near East or today's Israel. All of the rest of the grapes in the world, the Italian grapes, the French grapes, the American grapes, came from these first domesticated grapes in ancient Near East. So when John wrote about pruning the vines, his audience probably had a near to firsthand or a firsthand knowledge of what it meant to produce grapes, of what it meant to prune a vine. Now, grapevines are pruned every year. And there are different ways to prune a vine, but I won't go into that detail. And different grapes require different kinds of pruning, but all must be pruned to produce bountiful crops. If they're not pruned, they grow leggy and rangy, and they have lots and lots and lots of leaves, and all the nourishment from the roots goes into these woody vines and leaves instead of juicy grapes. If you're following the way, guided by the light, living in truth as part of the vine, you will bear fruits of joy and love. You will love one another. And if that's not happening in your life, well, that's a leggy, woody, leafy branch that needs to be pruned. Just burn it, get rid of it, stop it from continuing to grow. If it's not bearing fruit, it's not what you want. In fact, the leaves and the branches take nourishment from the plant. It's not frightening. It's not forever damnation. It's helpful. I do not believe the gospel writer wrote to frighten us into submission. What kind of grapes will we produce if we are just squashed? Remember, all these I am statements started after the feeding of the 5,000. People showed up and they said, how can we continue to get this food? I want to know how to get this food. And Jesus said, hey, listen, y'all, you're missing the point. I am the bread. I eat this bread. Do what I do. Follow my ways. Share, love, forgive, and there will always be enough for all. I am the vine. Do what I do, follow my ways, and when you find you're off course, when you see more leaves than grapes, stop, recalibrate, do some pruning, burn that pile, get it out of the way, and get back to a life that produces fruit. One of the most compelling qualities of this community is your desire to follow the way. Your hope to live in the vine, to live in a vine that produces fruit. And you do produce. You became open and affirming before it was common, as it is today. You've stepped outside of the church walls to stand against hateful legislation. Cis, as well as queer youth, are welcomed equally in all of our programs. You have normalized menstruation and find ways to supply hygiene products to women with little access. You provide scholarships to camp and to mission trips so that lack of funding will never be a reason that a child cannot experience these formative events in their lives. You show up to volunteer. VBS happens with aplomb, while other churches just can't find people to operate them. You make certain that our pantry is full. You make certain that Bethany Food Pantry has food, people that you will probably never know. And when something happens that doesn't produce fruit, or when you try something but it's not a right fit, you prune and you return to your roots. You recalibrate, you pray, and you start again because you believe that you are of the vine. Also, you're a spiritual home to many who have never felt at home, to many who've been kicked out of their spiritual homes, or those who found their previous homes too small for the God that they wanted to follow. This is an important church in Austin. It is a home to many ex-evangelicals, and it is a home to people like me were raised and who are being raised in a tradition where questions are welcomed, where people are not afraid to say their understandings of God change, where people are not afraid to confess that they're at church, but that they find faith elusive. This is such an important church in ways that you may never know. This week, I was called by someone who is in a hospital in town, someone we don't know. I don't know if we will meet this person, but this person called to talk to me because they had heard that we were LGBTQI friendly. And they needed to talk about what was happening to them in the hospital. I don't know how they found out about us. They're not from here. They're from Missouri. We are an important congregation of the vine. We are important yet unassuming. We're not grand or grandiose, but important. One day I found a driver's license on Saturday morning in the bathroom. With some Googling, I found the phone number of the owner and learned it belonged to a member of the Gender Hope support group that meets here on Friday evenings. The owner of the license lives in San Antonio. She met me one evening in our parking lot. She told me she never thought that she would meet in a church talking about her life and the path that she had been walking as she was transitioning. She never thought that a pastor would talk with her or take her seriously. She said she'd always been a Christian, but she thought no other Christians would claim her. You probably don't think about things like this, but just by having the lights on and a private room and safe parking and chairs, air conditioning and heating, you are helping people live to their fullest. People who have faced ridicule and scorn, rejection, and just by making this certain that this space is here, you are helping people walk in the light. You are helping people know they have a shepherd who loves them. You are helping these people know they are a part of the vine and we all are producing fruit. I tell you all of this because all of this, our youth programs, our adult programs, our building, our staff, our outreach, all cost money. Both the Christian Church Disciples of Christ and the United Church of Christ, the two denominations with whom we are affiliated, are what's called congregationally based. This means that each congregation is responsible for its own expenses, their buildings, their grounds. We receive no funds outside of what we raise in our tithes and offerings. And we're in a tight spot. A few weeks ago, we had financial fun facts after after church. It's work for me, I guess. I love it. She helped us see that during the pandemic, UCC was the recipient of your extra generosity. We were also the recipients of PPP grants. And since then, we've been drawing from those years of largesse, and we're not replenishing the pot. Now, it's not unusual for churches to operate on a tight budget, and it's not unusual for a church to keep most of its money in mission rather than in a bank account. But we're not going to be able to keep up at the rate we're going. Last year, we passed a huge deficit budget, and we're not going to do that again this year. And we are about 30,000 under our projected deficit. Some of you are concerned about the interim period and want to hurry up and hire your settled pastor before you make a pledge or before you commit financially. I want you to know that the search process is so much more than just the search committee. We have been doing that work since I got here. And I want to tell you that work to create the search committee is underway. And they will be assembled and begin their work in earnest once they are announced to the congregation, and it will happen before the end of the year. The interim search process is not a speedy one, especially under certain conditions. And the search process is more than just the search committee. You've been engaged in the necessary and difficult work of search since I've been here. We've been transparent about staffing issues and decisions that led to them. You've looked backwards and forwards in the Janus groups. We've made certain that financials are transparent and available to everyone. We are working to make all of those things even more transparent. We've hired a new youth ministry director after hearing from members what they want from this position. And we're almost complete with a total revision of our bylaws. We've updated our employee handbook. We now have a financial handbook. We soon will be finished with a set of church-wide policies. We have a dedicated group of people working to xeriscape our grounds and assist with providing an urban pollinator corridor. A group is formed that will take on church-wide recycling and maybe composting. And we are working to tidy up our roles so we know who is a member and who is not. And we've done all that while our numbers are growing and people have learned to laugh and to live in joy once again. Those all may seem a little boring, but they're essential for the operation of a healthy and vibrant congregation. And we are doing all the necessary and sometimes tedious work of putting our house right, so you may welcome your next pastor. But we are in a tight spot financially. We're only buying absolute essentials through the end of the year. And we'll build our budget based on an understanding of what our usual pattern of giving is and what is pledged. We're not going to present a budget like we did last year. If we do not have a robust stewardship campaign, we'll be forced to make some difficult decisions. I'm the only position that is full-time and who has benefits, and you may be forced to change that. And I have to say, though, that searching for a full-time pastor with an anemic budget is an unfortunate place to be. We are a loving community. We are a giving community of our time, but traditionally we are not a pledging community. A minority of this congregation supports the whole financially. I don't know who gives and who doesn't give. That different pastors manage that in different ways. I've always been that I don't want to know. But I know the aggregates, and I know that there's a small number of people who give regularly. And I know people can or cannot give to the church for a wide array of reasons. And I'm not here to try to embarrass or shame any of you. I am just telling you the facts because you need to know that. And if you want a superlative pastor, one who can meet the needs of this beautiful congregation, if you want to continue with our unique and welcoming children and youth spiritual formation programming, if you want to continue to be a welcoming space to people who may have no other space, you must consider what you can give. And I know that this is difficult to hear, but as your interim pastor, I'm called to say these things. I can say the things that nobody else wants to say because my job is interim. And I don't want to appeal to you with fear, but I ask, what is keeping you from giving to UCC? I wonder if what's keeping you at arm's length are but woody branches overgrown with leaves. Perhaps it's time to throw them away, to put them in the burn pile and reach back to the trunk of this productive vine. Together, we will continue to be and even grow as a place not of fear but of joy, a place that welcomes those who have lost their homes, a place of light and life, a place bearing fruit, so we may love one another, so we may be holy friends of the vine, and that the love of Christ, the light of Christ, might be seen through us. Amen.